Be a host. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Alternative Voting Methods Statewide Task Force. Here is our agenda for today. We have 3 things on the agenda, including some guest speakers. And we'll talk about Denver, and we'll talk about some bills in the legislature. And just a reminder of the meeting norms that you signed on to when you signed up for this Zoom link. And here are minutes from the last meeting. We talked about Senate Bill 25001. We talked about the County Commissioner's Bill. We talked about local efforts to educate and or adopt proportional representation, and we had little follow-ups on those things. We are going to start with meeting introductions. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see everybody. Tony, would you like to direct the meeting introduction so it's not just my voice all the time?
Okay, I'm Tony Larson, and I'm a member of the Denver League, but a lot of my activities are at the state level. And I am also the person who goes to all the task force meetings to make sure that, things are coordinated, or that if something's happening in one task force, another task force knows about it, kind of thing. So that's my role.
Do you want to pick people to speak, Tony, or?
I don't see everybody. I just see you.
Oh, okay.
And you already been talking, so.
Pat, why don't you go next?
Sure. I'm Pat Ventural. I'm a member of the Boulder County League and have been on the voting methods team for, a number of years. And we just keep plugging along. I can't get my lights situated. Cindy Black, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Cindy Black. I'm the executive director of Fixed Democracy First, but also a member of the Snohomish County League of Women Voters in Washington State. And I'll turn it over to Kit.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Kit Muehlman. I'm from Bellingham, Washington, and member of the Washington State League. And I joined the league because I was interested in voting methods, specifically ranked choice voting. And otherwise, I'm an artist and yoga teacher, but this seemed important. All right, Kirsten.
I'm Kirsten Rooks. I live in Seattle. I'm a member of the King County League and I think by default, the State League. And I have only really been active in this one group so far. I'm kind of a new member.
So we have a lot of people from Washington here.
Yeah. Chris.
Should we do all the Washington people right now? How about Chris, you go next?
Hello. So I'm Chris Mason. I'm a member of the Mason County League in Washington State and a volunteer with Fair Vote Washington, and have been active in electoral reform stuff since about 2017. I will then pass it to Paula. You're muted, Paula.
You want us to let somebody else go first and then you can go, Paula?
So Barbara's down there, who's also part of our group. Want to introduce yourself? She may not be doing any presenting today, but
Sure.
And you just had cataracts, or sorry, your eyes dilated.
How did you know that?
You told us.
Oh, okay. Yes. I'm from Southern Oregon, and I'm the vice president of the LWV Oregon League in dealing with communications down here on Action, and election systems has been my big forte for a long time. So that's why I'm part of this group.
Paula, can you talk now?
Yes, I certainly can. I'm Paula Lee. I'm not from Washington. I'm from California. And I'm from Sacramento specifically, where it's a very, very
Okay,
big
gotcha.
town. But I joined the league 30 years ago because I lived 30 years in a very bright red district, a one-party district, which we'll be discussing.
Okay,
And we'll ask for Betsy to introduce herself.
So I'm Betsy McBride, Boise, Idaho. Pardon me, Boise, Idaho, president of the State League of Idaho. We had a ballot issue that failed in the fall, but I really need to bring my members along on understanding proportional representation and how broadly it is used globally, even if it's unfamiliar in Idaho.
Tom, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'm Tom Alley, member of the Adams County League of Women Voters, and I've been involved in RCV efforts with RCV for Colorado and the Veterans for All Voters, and about a year's worth in the League of Women Voters, but probably only active in this group. Haven't done a lot.
We welcome your participation. We love your participation, Tom. Okay, Jesse?
Hi, Jesse Cuman. I started Best Democracy in 2015, specifically as a vehicle to promote proportional representation in the state of Colorado. At the time, 10 years ago, I checked around and no one was working on it, including the League of Women Voters, Common Cause. Fair Vote didn't really have a presence here, and I started an interest in proportional representation. I've kind of branched out, and I work on good governance and direct democracy issues as well, to get access for all of these. So
Thank
I
you,
don't know
Jesse.
if sometime we'll have time in this call to address the concept of ranked choice voting and how that gets misused.
We'll see how much time we have, Jesse, but let's go to Jen right now.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jen Cleland. I am a member of the Boulder County League. I'm co-leader of their voting methods team along with Celeste. I'm also a math professor at CU Boulder, and my academic work includes studying redistricting and alternative election systems, including various versions of ranked choice and proportional representation and things like that.
Great. Chris, Bob, would you go next?
Yeah, can you hear me? Do you hear me okay? I'm on a different computer and I don't.
We can hear you if you talk loudly enough.
Okay. I'm Chris Baum. I'm from North Glen, Colorado, and I am an approval voting advocate.
Okay, Mark Bonhorst.
Hi, I'm Mark Bonhorst from League of Women Voters, Minneapolis. I was in Denver on April 4th talking about Section 2 of the 14th Amendment.
Which is going to come up today. Thank you, Mark. Neil?
Great to have met you.
Hi, I'm Neil McBurnett, active in election voting method reform since the 1990s, largely now proportional representation, and active in election integrity and election auditing since 2002. Member of the Bipartisan Election Advisory Commission as nominated by the League of Colorado, and delighted to be able to meet with all you folks.
Great. I think I got everybody so far, right? Okay. And I'm Celeste Landry. I facilitate this group, and I've worked for a long time with Paula and Barbara on like the 2020 electoral, voter representation electoral systems position that the National League adopted. I'm a huge admirer of Cindy Black and her Fixed Democracy First weekly presentations, and so just wanted to say all that. Okay, we'll go ahead and go back to the slideshow. And some news. This is sort of following up on the idea Cindy does with her Fixed Democracy First. The State League sent an official thank you letter to Representative Bob Marshall because for the first time ever, he had a bill which would have offered proportional voting method, particular single transferable vote or proportional RCV, to elect county commissioners or to be used in Colorado. So we were thrilled about that. And it did not make it out of committee, but we've offered to work with him for next year on that. And we hope it got better this year from last year. Last year it didn't have any proportional voting method. This year it does. So we have high hopes for that maybe next year. The Colorado Voting Rights Act is moving along, and I know that Jen, for instance, submitted testimony on it because Jen wants more data, and the Colorado Voting Rights Act is asking for more data so we can make sure we have fair districts, things like that. And then last time we talked about the petition that the Boulder County League was circulating to get signatures, and we had a goal of 500 signatures. We submitted almost 600. On March 20th, we're asking the city council to hold a study session on proportional representation or a working group or a citizens assembly or a community assembly. And we're also working some with the Longmont group. They're sort of on a similar trajectory as us. So if there are any questions about this, you can go ahead and speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next page, which is news from around the US. If you are involved at all in implementing or trying to get a jurisdiction to adopt single transferable vote, I highly recommend you go to this Portland, Oregon webinar. And they have 4 election administrators talking about the process of getting their election to be so successful for such a big city. I'm thrilled with it. Some bad news is that North Dakota banned RCV and approval voting. I'm not sure if it's only IRV they banned or what, but instant runoff voting, or if they banned all types of RCV. Approval voting was used in Fargo. Last year, the legislature passed a bill to ban, I think it was probably the same exact bill, and the governor vetoed it. And even though they had a veto-proof vote when they first passed it, the League of Women Voters and some other people were able to change legislators' minds, and they did not get to override the veto the second time. But now it's a new governor because Doug Burgum is head of some interior or something. I don't remember which department. And the current governor did sign the bill. The League of Women Voters of Maine has conducted a study on proportional RCV or single transferable vote, and they are about to adopt a program position, I believe. And then one more piece of news, New Mexico is going to start opening up its primaries to unaffiliated voters. At least that's the way I understand it, the same as Colorado. So an unaffiliated voter could choose to vote either in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary. And then there are, Chris, you're going to talk about election methods for proportional representation at the Fixed Democracy First meeting, April 23rd,
In 2 days.
in 2 days. So I encourage people to go to that. There's also pretty much monthly PR 101 webinar done by Fair Vote Canada, half an hour presentation, then Q&A. So if you haven't ever done that, it's good to meet some people in Canada who care a lot about that. And then the Counted Out film is about math and democracy. And so there are showings all over the country. There were 314 in March to celebrate Pi Day 3.14. And there's one in Boulder this week. So, okay. Our next meeting date is going to be May 19th, which is our regular third Monday of the month. And the Colorado legislature is expected to adjourn on May 7th. Okay, now to our agenda. We are so lucky to have a bunch of people from the Proportional Representation Affinity Group here to talk to us about multi-member districts and proportional representation, and I'm going to stop sharing. And Barb Winery just showed up. Barb is a vice chair. Are you still a vice chair or vice of the state league?
I'm in charge of vice for the league. No, not really. Well, yeah, I moved on from vice chair to vice president to voter service, co-director of voter service.
Okay, so I think there's going to be some tag teaming in the presentation here.
Okay.
And we encourage you to hold your questions until the end. A lot of your questions will probably get answered along the way. So, and Cindy is saying, please mute yourself. Okay.
Just hearing a lot of background noise. I thought it'd be good if people could mute themselves.
Sure. Okay, that was my phone ringing. I apologize about that. I'm muting myself right now, and whoever starts, please go.
Thanks, Celeste. Yeah, that's me. I'm Kit Muehlman. I'm from Bellingham, Washington. And good afternoon, good evening. We're really happy to be here. And what we have is a presentation that we give a lot of different groups who have different levels of understanding. And we think that you all probably have a pretty high level of understanding of proportional representation in multi-member districts. But we're going to go over like most of the presentation so that you can see how we explain it. And hopefully that will be helpful because while the League of Women Voters supports proportional representation, but our affinity group has found that there's a lack of member understanding around election reforms involving proportional representation and multi-member districts. So next slide. The Proportional Representation Affinity Group is a grassroots group of league members from around the country interested in proportional representation. And this is our steering committee. The acronym is PRAG, so we call ourselves the Pragmatic Group. And next, we usually start with a poll and end with the poll too. We're just going to show you the poll right now so that you can see the questions we ask. And you can jot down the answers for yourself if you like. The questions are, do you know what a multi-member district is? Do you know what proportional representation means? And how important is it for a minority group, that's political, racial, economic, etc., to elect a candidate of their choice? And we recommend a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being never heard of it, and 5 being I could teach a class on it. So we ask people to answer these questions, and we have a spreadsheet that we put the answers into, but we're not going to take time for that today. And what we'll cover. So we'll cover the League of Women Voters position, the national position. We'll cover what a multi-member district is. what proportional representation is, history of multi-member districts in the United States, an abbreviated history, and some current developments. And we're not covering specific voting methods because that is another large topic, but we will mention some. It serves as an introduction to multi-member districts, but does not cover the different voting methods that could be used. And Chris will deliver that Wednesday. I'm sorry, I can't be there. I'm in Portland for Portland, Oregon for a seminar on the way the elections went in Portland, and I'm really looking forward to that. So why learn about proportional representation? Well, there are a few things to learn here. First, the League of Women Voters of the United States position supports election methods that result in proportional representation. And second, all election methods that result in proportional representation require multi-member districts. And why now? There's angst across the political spectrum. And in a Wall Street Journal poll released in October 2024, 87% of the voters said they will believe America will suffer permanent damage if their candidate loses. And in the fall of 2024, Portland, Oregon started using proportional representation elections with multi-member districts to elect their city council. And the league there was instrumental in voter education. And we're looking forward to the release of the League of Women Voters of Maine's study on proportional ranked choice voting. So let's look at the League of Women Voters position on proportional representation. So Paula?
Yes, let's go back a little bit to 1921 and the second annual National League of Women Voters Convention. Our founding mother of the league, Carrie Chapman Catt, was reporting on the floor of convention. This is what she said in her report as chair of the Election Methods Committee. This is from an official audio recording. Quote, "If you ask any of those women why it is that their countries have been willing to elect women, they will say proportional representation. They will say that you will never get women in office until you get it," unquote. Our founding mother, Carrie Catt, concluded that support for proportional representation was a natural extension of suffrage. And that was over 100 years ago.
Next slide.
The League of Women Voters of the United States adopted a position of support for PR in June of 2020. The League of Women Voters publication Impact on Issues on page 58 states this: "The League supports electoral systems that elect policymaking bodies, which includes legislatures, councils, commissions, and boards that proportionately reflect the people they represent. We support systems that inhibit political manipulation, for example, gerrymandering." There's more on the next slide. As part of the position, Impact on Issues continues with, "The LWVUS supports enabling legislation to allow local jurisdictions to explore alternative election methods and supports state election laws that allowing for more options at both the state and the local levels." And this position provides us with a very clear but flexible base of principles that we can explore election method reforms, and we can take action where appropriate for voters. So what are multi-member districts, Chris?
Well, simply, a multi-member district is an electoral district that elects 2 or more representatives, usually 3, 5, or 7. Elected bodies that can use multi-member districts include city and county councils, as well as fire, school, and legislative districts, among others. For example, a city that elects 5 city council members at large from a single citywide district is considered a multi-member district. This is because all of those members of the council originate from one district as opposed to 5 individual single-member districts. It is important to note that the voting method used in a multi-member district makes a big difference. There are 2 types of elections that can be used in a multi-member body, so let's contrast them. Single winner elections are where one representative is elected at a time. When elections are done this way, the largest block of voters is able to elect their candidate of choice. For example, with 10 single winner election contests, the largest group of voters can capture all 10 seats and 100% of the representation while denying representation to their political minorities. In this image, the gray suited voters are the largest group and can outvote all the smaller groups for each individual seat. This is called winner take all. This is true for 10 single-member districts or 10 seats in a multi-member district that uses separate single winner elections for each position. And then next, on the other hand, multi-winner election contests are just that, an election where multiple candidates will win a seat. When one election contest has multiple winners, like-minded voters can elect candidates in proportion to their share of the electorate. The majority wins the majority of seats, and each sizable minority is also able to elect a candidate of their choice. Said another way, you have majority rule with minority representation. In this version of the image, if the gray suit group has 40% of the vote, then 40% of the representatives will be in gray suits. If the orange shirt group gets 20% of the vote, then 20% of the representatives will have orange shirts. If the white shirt party wins 30% of the vote, then 30% of the representatives will be from the white shirt party. The groups represented here by different colors do not all have to be a political party. They can represent any issue that is important to a group of voters. Some examples are parents, renters, transit riders, business owners, climate advocates, or voters who identify with a religion, gender, race, or political party. The important idea here is that to achieve proportional representation, you need a multi-member district where you elect all those representatives at the same time in a multi-winner election contest using a proportional election method. So history helps us see how multi-member districts work. Let's take a look.
So there's quite a bit of American history that can help us understand. You might be surprised to learn that Illinois used multi-member legislative districts to elect their state representatives for 110 years. So back in 1870, the state was severely polarized after the Civil War, and yet 3-member districts helped avoid gridlock. And more in that in a minute. So in other parts of the country, in the progressive era in the early 20th century, a new development arose. So 24 cities in 6 states used multi-member districts for various periods of time to produce proportional results for their city councils. And proportional multi-member districts for city councils increased racial as well as ideological diversity. But by the 1950s, detractors managed to repeal the practice almost everywhere through local efforts. So in Illinois, from 1870 to 1980, they elected their state House of Representatives in 3-member districts to avoid the post-Civil War gridlock. And because Illinois used a proportional form of voting, each 3-member district reflected the diversity of its voters, with Republicans winning some seats even in Democratic strongholds and vice versa. And drilling down, voters in the minority party in almost every district had a representative, while the majority party had 2 representatives. And both Republicans and Democrats say they experienced more civility and less polarization. The 3-member districts survived many efforts to change the single-member districts, but in 1978, a controversy over legislative salaries led to a successful drive to reduce the size of the state house. So to punish legislators for raising their own salaries, voters approved the cutback amendment in 1980. So 3-member districts were split in half and 1 member was elected per district. So next slide. So when Illinois used 3-member legislative districts, Both Republicans and Democrats reported more inter-party cooperation and bipartisan legislation. The graph here shows how inter-party cooperation dropped dramatically after 1983 to near zero, after Illinois changed from multi-member districts to single-member districts. State legislator Giddy Dyer explained it like this. I think the lack of civility began when we did away with proportional representation in the multi-member districts. Because now it's just like two armies in full regalia fighting each other. There's just total squashing of many good ideas. And
Next slide.
Kirsten.
Oh, thank you. In the early 20th century, 5 Ohio cities were among the first in the nation to adopt proportional multi-member district voting: Toledo, Ashtabula, Cleveland, Hamilton, and Cincinnati. All 5 cities began to elect members of traditionally underrepresented groups in far greater numbers: Blacks, Italians, Irish, Polish, and women. Unfortunately, gains by these previously underrepresented groups disturbed the party bosses. The backlash against the visible presence of ethnic minority elected officials fueled persistent efforts to repeal proportional voting. And by 1960, all 5 cities had given up on proportional voting and returned to traditional party politics. Theodore Berry, seen here, was elected to the Cincinnati City Council in 1949 with proportional voting. When proportional voting was repealed in 1957, he lost his seat. After 1957, without proportional voting, Cincinnati elected no African-American council members, even though the city at this time was 35% Black. In the 1980s and 1990s, Berry sought to return proportional representation to Cincinnati because he firmly believed that it gave a fair share of power to Black voters. Next slide, thank you. In Cleveland, Ohio, 8 women were elected to the city council between 1924 and 1931. Before then, no woman had been elected to the Cleveland City Council, even though women gained the right to vote in city elections in 1916. Cleveland used proportional representation for 7 years, and 8 women were elected over the course of just 5 elections. However, Cleveland repealed proportional representation in 1931, and after the repeal, no women were elected to the city council for 18 years, until 1949, when Mary McCaffrey ran for the seat her late husband had held. Paula, tell us about New York City now.
Well, New York City was one of the 24 US cities that used proportional representation during the Progressive Era in the early 20th century. New York City elected its first Black city council member, Adam Clayton Powell, in 1941. And then Powell went on to serve in the US House of Representatives. And in his place, Benjamin Davis was elected to the city council 3 times, starting in 1943. Well, the Democratic and Republican parties were unhappy with the loss of traditional control over the city council elections. And they made numerous attempts to repeal this voting method. They finally succeeded in 1947 by inflaming fear of communism, and Davis was associated with the Communist Party. The first election after the repeal returned the city council back to an all-white male council. However, of the 24 cities that used multi-member districts with a proportional voting method in the early 20th century, Cambridge, Massachusetts is unique for not repealing it. Cambridge still elects all 9 city council members in a citywide election every 2 years, with the seats filled from a single pool of candidates. They've been doing this since 1941, and the Cambridge model produces a city council that varies in gender, race, age, and political views. Cambridge also elects its school board using proportional representation. And I will add, I went there one time excitedly to learn about this and went to the registrar's office, asked for a brochure, and they were so proud of their system. In addition, next slide, in addition to all the local repeals in 1967, Congress passed a law against multi-member districts for Congress. Why did they do this? Because the white majority in some southern states could elect all members of a congressional delegation. They could do this because they were using non-proportional winner-take-all election methods and a single statewide district. This allowed the dominant political party to win more than their fair share of seats. There are multiple ways to address this problem. One is to break the states up into districts, and the other is to use proportional representation. Congress, unfortunately, chose districts. They passed the Uniform Congressional District Act, requiring that states have discrete single-member districts for congressional elections in all states. This act applies to federal elections to the U.S. House of Representatives, not to state legislators. Remember that gerrymandering is only possible when there is just a single winner in a district. Alternatively, they could have kept the multi-member district and changed to proportional voting method, but they didn't. So remember, this is not part of the Constitution. It's a law, and it can be changed very simply with a vote in Congress. Kirsten?
Thank you. The League is following the changes in Portland, Oregon city government with interest. In a 2019 report, the City Club of Portland concluded that while the current Commission of Local Government has various merits, it is inherently inequitable and has long since ceased to be the most effective form of government for Portland. The Portland Charter Review Commission recommended a change in the city government, and the Portland League of Women Voters advocated in favor of that change. In 2022, the voters of Portland, Oregon approved a ballot measure to use multi-member districts and a proportional voting method for their city council. Next. Thank you. Previously, Portland elected 4 city council members in separate citywide contests. Because each seat was elected separately, the largest block of voters, the dark greens in this graphic, could elect all the representatives. That meant about half the city's voters, the minority blocks of voters, did not elect a representative to the city council. Portland has chosen to use another method of voting, a proportional voting method that elects representatives to the city council in proportion to their support or vote share. The graphics illustrate how a change in the election method leads to results that more accurately reflect the makeup of that population. On the left, each separate seat contest results in a dark green winner. On the right, a proportional voting method results in representatives from 3 groups. Chris Hubbard, a concerned citizen, made a video to help visualize the new districts in Portland, Oregon, and show how different ways of voting produce different outcomes. Now, we normally show this video, but I think folks here are more well-informed. We could show it, or we could just give a link to it, and we could continue.
What would people like to do? I just put the link in the chat. It's 6 minutes, 27 seconds.
Or we could proceed and see,
If
play
there's
the-
time, we could do it at the end.
at the end if
Okay.
if people want it. We'll see if there's more interesting questions or in that
Oops.
video. Yeah. Chris would like to speak. Chris Hubbard would like to speak, but we'll decide later.
Okay. And wait, okay, there we go. So the very first election using a proportional voting method was just this past November 5th, and here is the new council. Voters chose leaders who form a portrait of the city in miniature. The dozen councilors include 3 renters, 5 people of color, 6 women, 8 millennials, 1 who's only 28 years old, and residents of 12 different neighborhoods.
So let's talk about or take a look at gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is only possible with single member districts where the district lines can be manipulated to choose which voters are in each district. Multi-member districts with proportional representation is the only real solution to gerrymandering. This is because when multiple representatives are elected from a district, it is no longer winner take all, so there is less incentive to manipulate boundary lines. More people in the district will have representative that has similar values to their own, and it is much harder to crack and pack voters to pick all the winners. So how would multi-member districts affect redistricting?
Okay. When multiple representatives are elected from a single district, the districts are generally larger. The lines are much less important, and they can follow geographical and cultural boundaries more often. This makes the entire process of drawing districts much less contentious. Redistricting and redistricting commissions are still needed to draw boundaries as populations change. A redistricting commission has to take into account the voting method and the election rules that will be used in each district. Independent redistricting commissions alone cannot guarantee proportional representation. Most local governments do not need districts other than their existing municipal boundaries. Very large municipalities may still want a combination of geographic areas and proportional representation, the way that Portland, Oregon did.
Next slide. So what would proportional representation look like for Congress? Well, it is a reality. A bill has been introduced into Congress called the Fair Representation Act that would bring proportional representation to the House of Representatives. I believe Joe Neguse, your representative from Colorado, is one of the sponsors. States would elect the same number of representatives that they do currently. Small states with 5 or fewer representatives would be a single district. And then large states would have multiple districts like California, with each district having an equal number of voters. In these maps that you see on the slide, Connecticut and Oklahoma look like one-party states. But really, there are Republicans in Connecticut and there are Democrats in Oklahoma. And believe it or not, in the United States, there are 9 states that have only one-party representation in Congress, the People's House. So only one party is represented like many districts are. But under the Fair Representation Act, no matter where a person lives, there would be someone in Congress that represents them. So I just wanted to let you know who the sponsors, of course, co-sponsors were of this, a few of the co-sponsors. I'm going to just mention a couple of names that you might recognize that have co-sponsored the Fair Representation Act. It was Donald Byer from Virginia that introduced it, co-sponsored by Jamie Raskin, Earl Blumenthal from Oregon, Ro Khanna from California, and your Representative Joe Neguse, and others. Next slide, Chris.
So the League of Women Voters of Maine is currently doing a study on proportional voting. League of Women Voters studies are a very rigorous process and give members the knowledge that make League action uniquely credible. We expect they will vote and approve a new position at their state convention in June of 2025. This will provide something for other leagues around the country to concur with and has the potential to become a published position for the League of Women Voters of the United States to be included in future editions of Impact on Issues. Now, Kit will wrap things up.
So every good league project considers pros and cons, and these are some potential advantages of multi-member districts when a proportional voting method is used. First, proportional representation can be achieved with multi-member districts. More voters can feel represented. When Illinois operated with 3-member districts, voters in the minority party still had one representative. Increases in inter-party cooperation and bipartisan legislation. With multi-member districts, third-party and independent candidates can run viable campaigns. And multi-member districts can eliminate gerrymandering. And the disadvantages of multi-member districts are third parties can grow. So it's an advantage or a disadvantage depending on where you stand. Those who think the two-party system serves us well don't want to change. And larger geographic multi-member districts may affect how candidates campaign and lawmakers govern. On the one hand, your representative might live farther away. On the other hand, you might feel closer in values to someone outside your neighborhood. And when multiple positions are being elected at the same time, voters will have to make multiple choices from a single, larger list of candidates than they are used to now. And if multi-member districts are used in conjunction with non-proportional voting, such as our current single winner method, the way that some southern states were using it back before 1967. If multi-member districts are used in conjunction with non-proportional voting, the group of voters with the largest number can get 100% of the representation, and political minorities would get no representation. So this is a reminder that multi-member districts themselves are not a solution to fair representation. The voting method really matters. And to wrap up, the League supports adoption of election methods that produce proportional representation when electing representative government bodies such as councils, legislatures, and Congress. And multi-member districts are required for proportional representation because single-member districts cannot produce proportional representation. And proportional voting methods are key to producing proportional results. And this is not new. Multi-member districts have a history in the United States. And proportional representation is gaining attention around the country. So, gosh, there are so many organizations paying attention to this. And our group has a resources page with links to more writing than we have time to mention. But they include the Academy of Arts and Sciences, Represent Women, More Equitable Democracy, Our Common Purpose, and it looks like Chris is putting those in the chat now. Thanks so much. This presentation, too, is available for your local group. Next slide. We're glad to go on Zoom to Idaho if that helps, Betsy, or if you'd like to be part of the presentation and tailor it to Idaho, that would be awesome too. So thank you so much. And that's the end of our slideshow, and we're ready for questions anytime.
I have a question. You mentioned the U.S. Fair Representation Act. Has it been introduced in this Congress yet? Not yet. Okay.
Oh, right. Officially.
Yeah, we have a new Congress. I mean, it's been introduced in the last few Congresses. So, but I want to encourage everybody to talk to your U.S. representative, because the reason Joe Neguse is a co-sponsor is because I kept bugging him. And finally he looked it up. He knows Jamie Raskin. He admires Jamie Raskin, and he said, okay, great. He signed on to it. I think he wanted to hang out with Jamie Raskin some.
So we normally also do the poll at the end. So I'm just curious for the folks who are watching, do you think your numbers would have changed from the beginning to the end of the presentation?
Beth, I don't think you were here for the questions. You got here a little late.
Well, then also, do we have time to watch that video, you think?
I have a couple other things on the agenda, so
Okay.
why don't we take these questions? I can always do the presentation of the 6-minute video afterwards. And I don't know if the Prague group wants to stay around or not, but anyway, Jesse, you have a question, and it looks like there's a a technical correction from Neil, which is in the weeds, I will say. Good for you, Neil, but okay, Gypsy.
Not so much a question. I have a comment. Um, I talked with Joe Neguse 3 days before he signed on. And I gave him my little presentation card on best democracy and gave him my pitch for joining on the Fair Representation Act. And he was pretty fast about signing on to that. And he let me know. So just to add on to what you were saying, maybe hopefully I gave him that little extra push.
I think one of the things that helped him was that the first year I talked to him, it had some random number. The next year, somebody
Right.
was able to get House Bill or House Resolution 3000. He said, whoa,
I think it was
that's an
4,000.
important number.
HR 4,000.
And he signed, and I think he had, yeah, that's when he signed on. So, yeah, I wish we could get a great number like that again.
Okay, so I wrote him 3 days ago and asked for a meeting so that we could update his the version of the Fair Representation Act. I think that the version that they proposed in the past is kind of lame and not a very good version. And I don't think that these people understand the concept of district magnitude and different forms of proportional representation. So they don't know about party list systems. You haven't discussed that. And it should be brought to people's attention. Maybe someone else will do that. Most countries use party lists. Only a few countries use single transferable vote.
Party lists require parties though. So like for our Boulder City Council effort, we can't use that.
That's true, but for the Fair Representation Act,
Yeah.
they're using a version of single transferable vote. It's not a particularly good version, and they're not aware of party list systems. Most of the 95 countries using proportional systems are using party list systems.
Jesse, Lee Dretman, who's with Protect Democracy, is very aware of party lists. There's even some talk of having a citizens initiative next year, which would elect partisan offices in Colorado using party lists. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Betsy.
So one of the things that became apparent as we were working on open primaries, ranked choice voting, an initiative that looked very much like Colorado's, was we were teaching people how it worked with slides that looked not too much different from the ones I just saw, but we didn't have good stories. And of course, politics is frequently about stories. So it's, what happened? What was different? Not just the color of the faces, but, an urban issue that was stuck for 10 years that suddenly moved because of the proportional representation. But so we were unable to say, how is your life going to be better if you vote yes? We were really good at demonstrating with colors how it would work, but we couldn't say how life would be better.
Thanks, Betsy. Anybody want to answer that? I mean, I think the campaign to adopt proportional representation is critical. I know in Cambridge, where they've had it since 1941, the state legislature said, you now have the option, cities, of adopting Plan E. And so Cambridge put it on the ballot, and they sold it as proportional representation. Yay, yay. And it failed. Next time around, they put it on the ballot again, same exact plan, but they talked more about the strong city manager and getting rid of the power of the mayor, and which was corrupting the mayor. And so then it worked. In Portland, they had a 2-year process with a charter review committee. They're supposed to review their charter every 10 years. And so the charter review committee said, we see problems, and they came up with this wide-ranging solution. They went from 4 city council members to 12. And who knows if that's the best thing. I mean, you only get to vote on one ballot measure usually. So
Yeah, well, the
Anybody else
Portland
wants to speak up?
Charter Review Commissioners also, they had the 2 years to work on it, and they had something like 26 listening sessions across the city. So they worked really, really hard to get this and get the buy-in. They didn't go in with a specific idea of what they thought would work well. They went around and asked people.
So for the question about like visualizing how this would be different, I recommend that there's a couple of videos on representingwa.org, our coalition, state coalition, and they just do a fun job of mentioning parents and transit riders and sort of some of these groups, and how the way an election is done actually changes the outcome.
I also imagine, I mean, this is anecdotal, but you just hear so much about people who feel like voting doesn't matter. It's totally co-opted by people with money and stuff. And I would be very interested to see the level of voting the next time Portland City has its election, because people might realize like, oh, wait a minute, that person who, I like, that renter, who represents me, actually made it. So I think that it's maybe harder to say, how will this improve your life? But it's easy to list a bunch of things that are negative about our current system and kind of explain how a proportional voting method could help remedy that.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And I hope that you have many more forums for presenting these ideas of multi-member districts and proportional representation, because we're all in the Colorado League. I think we're pretty much huge fans of proportional representation. Neil, I think you're going to have to be the last comment, because we got 2 other big deal Colorado things to talk about.
Okay, well, I don't want to take too much time away, but and I dearly have supported PR for a long time, but I just keep seeing, political situations in different places squash the ideas, as we saw all the cities turned it back because of party approaches. We see in different states, different parties pushing back in the US. I noted that in the chat. So if anybody has a way to address that sad reality, I think that's a big thing to work on.
I think we need some more successes. Neil, I'm going to contact you about talking to some city council members. Okay, I'm going to go. Thank you, everybody, for
If,
sharing your
could I just
expertise.
say, any feedback that you have for us about the presentation? Could you share that with Celeste later? And that would be helpful to us as we want to present this to other league members. And so let us know what you think. It would be appreciated.
We appreciate all of you. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. I think this is it. Do you see? Okay.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, Jan, is that you?
Oh, great. Yeah, I had the wrong microphone selected. I just wanted to answer the thing about the effects of PR. I think the crisis that we're in right now with someone trying to be a dictator is in large part due to the voting system that we're using. And right now we have the system of checks and balances just doesn't work when one party is in control of all three branches. So if we have proportional representation in the U.S. Congress, it's much more difficult to have one party take over everything. Right, because you have like even 20% for a third party would probably prevent either of the major parties from being able to get a majority.
I think another thing is that you would have less wild swings. Even if we still only had two parties, it would be much harder to totally drastically change everything when you go to one side, because that's just going to encourage voters to swing to the other side as a backlash. So if you had proportional representation, I think you'd do more of a middle ground.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to move on to Denver. And Tom, I don't know if you know more about this than I do, but so speak up if you do. But there's a draft proposal and Tony, maybe you know more too, to change from vote for one plurality voting to IRV, instant runoff voting, for almost all the elected officials. So for mayor, for auditor, for clerk and recorder, and then for 11 of the 13 city council members, the ones that are elected in single winner elections by district. There are also 2 that are elected at large in a 2-winner election. And my understanding is, here's a ranked voting ballot so you can see what the instant runoff voting ballot looks like. I think probably everybody here knows what it looks like. And just in terms of counting, only the first choice is counted in the first round. And then depending on what happens to that candidate, if they're eliminated, then you get to look at the second choice on the ballot. If they win in the first round, you don't see the second, third, fourth, or fifth choices on the ballot. What's proposed is to use instant runoff voting for all the single winner contests that are currently done. Right now, each single winner contest, the winner must receive a majority of the vote. If nobody receives a majority of the vote in that contest, then there's a top 2 runoff, and then one of those 2 gets more than half of the votes. And then there'd be no change for the 2-winner contest. And I think I'm right so far, Tony, Tom, anybody who knows what the current status is, because it might be a moving target, speak up.
You're right. And a packet of letters from a variety of organizations have been sent to the Denver City Council, encouraging them to put the proposal on the ballot in November. So, and we're meeting frequently, trying to get we're doing a pretty good job of getting our ducks in a row. So
when I looked at the proposal, I looked at it through the lens of the League of Women Voters, and knowing that the league supports proportional representation in elected bodies, my thought, and other people in the league also had this thought, was why not consider proportional representation? And since Denver and Portland have about the same size city council, you could just take Portland's model and save one
Well,
council member and
yeah.
copy it.
And I don't disagree with you, Celeste, and proportional representation is in the minds of most of the people who are working on this proposal. I think the momentum there is more for IRV at the moment, and that proportional representation is the next step.
I hear that argument a lot, that first we'll do single winner and then we'll move to multi-winner proportional ranked voting, but I haven't found that that's the standard trajectory. So I worry a little bit about this.
Yeah. Well, it, in a way, it is what it is. And the momentum is there for ranked choice voting. So, I mean, that's the direction in which we're going, but indeed, proportional representation is on the table.
So here is a possible better voting proposal, offering instant runoff voting and proportional single transferable vote. Jesse, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I've heard that argument a lot of times, and every time that I hear it, I ask people to please cite one example where that has ever happened, and no one can ever come up with an example where an IRV system has turned into a proportional system. It just doesn't happen, and it's a false claim.
Speak up if you have an answer, if you have an example. I'm curious too.
Yeah, there are no examples.
Okay.
The obvious counterexample is not a counter, but Boulder told us the same thing, and council members said the same thing, and we're still
and
not
all they
even
did
hearing a
was
response.
adopt. They said, oh yeah, we like proportional, and all they did was adopt instant runoff voting for the mayor.
That's one
Instead of
argument. The other argument that I hear a lot is that anything that's not first past the post is too complicated. And I explain to people that everything is more complicated than first past the post. And if that's the criteria that you're going to use for stopping it, then you basically want to stick with a system that distorts outcomes and excludes people. So you have to have a proportional system. Something else I want to address, and it's this consistent use of ranked choice voting, where people don't distinguish. People don't
talk about
distinguish.
that after we talk about
It got used in the presentation again. I've heard this presentation
so why don't you
before,
tell me that
and they
afterwards, and we'll add it to the comments on the presentation. But I only have 22 minutes left, and I want to.
It's deceptive, Celeste, and they should stop saying it.
Tom, you have your hand up.
I haven't been in the loop on the Denver effort, and I actually agree with you, Celeste, that your proposal statement would be better. Do we know what groups are?
I know Linda Templin has been making comments on the draft language.
Oh, good. But I'm wondering, what is the coalition of groups this time around for Denver? Do we?
Who's the guy? Landon somebody?
Oh, Landon Mascarenas?
Yeah,
still?
I think he's leading it.
Okay.
So you should contact him.
My file to see if I can find names of groups.
Yeah. So I don't know what to do about Denver, but I thank you, Tom, for What a good league member you are. You want proportional representation for a council.
No,
Good
I
for
mean,
you. Okay.
but you could even do it for the at large. I mean,
Well, it's not that useful for two, because if there are two factions, one will each get a seat. And so typically you try to have an odd number of seats that you're filling, so you have some, like Illinois had the 3 seats, so the
Yeah.
majority would get 2 and the minority would get 1.
I hear you, but it would also be a chance to introduce the
Yeah.
system.
But if they're going to do that, they might as well go whole hog and do the whole council, you
Oh, I
know?
agree, but yeah.
I think it would
Okay.
be a distinct advantage even with 2 seats. So, some representation for everybody is a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about these vacancy election bills. They are hot, hot, hot. And they're hot because there are so many people in the state legislature that have been replaced, that have gotten their office through a vacancy committee. And if somebody dies or resigns from office, then a vacancy committee of the political party who left, of the legislator who left, gets to pick the same party replacement to serve until the next general election. That would be an even-numbered year November election. And so since the November 2024 election, 2 people who got reelected immediately, Chris Hansen and Janet Buckner, they got reelected and then they said, oh, just kidding, I'm going to resign. And this makes voters furious. And then another person was running for county commissioner and was a senator. So 2 years into his Senate term, he wins the seat of county commissioner, which pays more, is close to home, etc. And so he got replaced in the state legislature. And then a state senator who had ethics problems that we knew about from last year, she finally resigned under duress. And so we have 4 new senators out of 35. And so that's terrible. That's more than 10% of the senators are brand new because of a vacancy. Nobody died, mind you. Like Janet Buckner, one of the 2 that resigned right after getting reelected, she got that seat because her husband died and she took, almost, it's like 30% of the people in the state legislature originally got there through a vacancy committee. So it's a very undemocratic process. So under the current situation, those people who just got appointed will get to serve for 2 full sessions, January to May this year, January to May next year, which is a lot of time to serve when you've been elected by 50 people. These 2 bills propose a change in the vacancy committee process. They would keep the vacancy committee appointment, but if the vacancy occurs before July 31st of an odd-numbered year, so like this year, then in November, there would be an election to fill the seat. We call that a coordinated election when it's an odd-numbered November election, odd-numbered year November election. And, the league is in favor of empowering voters, defending democracy. We love this election idea, except the candidates for this special vacancy election can only belong to the party of the person who's holding it right now. And the electorate is limited to that party and unaffiliated voters. So it's like the electorate is like the primary election, except a primary election doesn't actually elect anybody. It winnows down the field and advances people to the general election where everybody gets to vote and anybody can run, and that's way more democratic. So we are unhappy with this part, and we have 3 amendments we've proposed. First, allow every elector to vote. Allow any elector, regardless of party, to run in the election. And 3, use a better voting method, because, you know, we don't want to have, we might have, because there's no primary, we might have like 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat, and the 3 Republicans would split the vote and the Democrat would get elected, even though it's a majority Republican seat. So, so we sent out a press release today with these amendments, and in particular, we also had a concern about House Bill 1315, which we think is probably unconstitutional. We didn't like the bill before. We thought it was unconstitutional, but now we have a very good argument to push against this limited vacancy bill. So Section 2 of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and I want to thank Mark Bonhorst for pointing this out. The 14th Amendment protects against when the right to vote at any election for president, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied or in any way abridged. That's a violation. And if you're only letting certain registered voters participate, and if you're not letting them vote on a whole slate of candidates, that sounds like you're denying people the right to vote, or you're abridging the right to vote. And we actually met with the Colorado Democratic Party attorney on Saturday, and her opinion is that the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to vacancy elections. And she said that other states hold vacancy elections, but we've done research and we have found no other state that holds such a limited vacancy election. Evidently this was modeled after a Tennessee bill, which has a few people from the same county who are in the legislature pick the replacement, but then in the November of the odd year, they hold a vacancy election, but that vacancy election lets anybody run. It's a special election. Half the states use a special election. So I certainly don't want Colorado to be in violation of anything like this. So, okay, let's go on to this next slide. The companion slide is not about the legislature, it's about county commissioners, and it's House Bill 1319. Since the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment only refers to federal and some state offices, the 14th Amendment would not pertain to House Bill 1319, but I think that the league still wants everybody to be able to vote, wants everybody to be able to run who's eligible. And it would be very odd if we had one system for the legislature and then a different kind of election for county commissioners. So I also want to point out the fiscal note. We're in a very tight fiscal year this year. We had $1 billion+ in the hole that we needed to close the gap for. Each of these bills will cost more than $300,000, which actually doesn't seem like that much considering our huge budget and our huge hole. But it turns out that if you allow, most of that cost, 90% of that cost, is limiting the election. So we could have a fiscal win if we just allowed everybody to vote and anybody to run. The cost of using a better voting method is a different question. It depends on the voting method used. If you used approval voting, which can prevent vote splitting, the cost is negligible. If you use instant runoff voting, there could be significant cost. And some of you may know that last year we had Senate Bill 24-210, which prohibited use of IRV in a primary or general election until certain conditions have been met. This was the anti-Prop 131 bill that the amendment was introduced on the House floor and nobody really read it, and it got approved maybe with a voice vote. It was not democracy's finest hour. But it turns out Senate Bill 210 does not prohibit IRV in a coordinated election. In fact, it says you have to hold a certain number of coordinated, like municipal elections, in order, and they have to be successful before you can use it in a primary or a general election. So here's what an approval voting ballot looks like. I think everybody knows you could vote for all you support, and the most votes wins. Here's the status of the two bills. We've had the House bill, they both passed House State Affairs. They both passed appropriations. These two bills were the first item on the agenda today, and they did not get to them. They changed the order of business, and now usually they finish like by noon, but they went till like 4 o'clock. It was a very long session today. They were talking, one of the bills was about state ballot measures and regulating those. So that's also very interesting. Anyway, these two bills were laid over till tomorrow. We'll see what happens. I think that's my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think some people put things in the notes and I can't necessarily see them. Neil, you mentioned HCR 24-1004. That failed in committee. That's the vacancy committee. You can't run for the office the second time, isn't that right?
That's right. I mean, I think one of the best approaches to deal with this is basically to depoliticize the matter a little bit by saying, sure, go ahead, appoint a new person, but make sure that whoever is appointed is just temporary, because the people have to speak. And if you avoid the incumbent advantage, then that would go a long way to resolving kind of the issue. But yeah, I think you're right that this issue has come up twice by Bob Marshall, and I think maybe this year as well as last year it didn't make it out of committee. But it's a good approach that we should keep mentioning.
The league did not support his HCR, but the Forward Party did. But
why did the league not?
Well, I'm not sure the league wants to tell people they can't run for election, which is what you're saying. You can run now, but you can't run later, So
it's a balancing act, no matter how you do it.
Yeah.
There is a big cost to an interim election. There's a big, it's unfortunate not to have representation for a long period of time, et cetera.
There's not a lot of extra cost if you're having it in November of an odd year. There's not.
But then you don't have any representation for the.
No, you still have the vacancy committee. That part stays the same until under this proposal.
Yeah, well, that proposal gives them a big advantage.
Of course.
Incumbent. So I'm trying to avoid the incumbent advantage, which I think is dominant in politics and is something that we really need to fight.
I think if we had special elections, then we wouldn't have so many people deciding, oh, just kidding, I don't really want to do this job. Tom, you've had your hand up for a while. And then Mark after Tom.
I left it up. I'm sorry. I'll take it down. I didn't realize.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Am I up,
Yes.
Celeste? Okay, so I was looking at this afternoon, and one fairly important point is that the Constitution of the state provides for vacancies that the person appointed to fill the vacancy shall be a member of the same political party, yada, yada, yada. So that's a constitutional command.
Colorado Constitution.
Colorado. So, I mean, the state legislature can't just ignore that. So I think there's still a 14th Amendment Section 2 issue, which is if you're going to do this by an actual election instead of by appointment, you got to let everybody elect. So it may be a Republican replacing a Republican, but everybody gets to vote. And you might get more centrist, more representative Republicans than if you leave it up just to the Republicans and independents. So I think it's still a point worth making, but it's not quite as open and shut as I thought before.
I mean, we had a special election this year because Lauren Boebert moved to a different House district, and then the person who was in that House district resigned early, and so they had a special election to finish the rest of Ken Buck's term. And Lauren Boebert didn't run for it because she still was representing her old district, but you know, they had to do some conventions by party to pick the nominee who would run. So they probably got somebody less extreme than Lauren Boebert. He's now running for governor for the third time.
Mm-hmm. That was CD4 up here in Weld County, part of Larimer.
Yeah. We like the idea of the vacancy election. We just think it should be open for everybody.
Time to wrap this up.
And we also think that it's unconstitutional for state legislature elections not to include everybody. Yes, Neil.
Just quickly, if someone can post a link to the league statement on the vacancy bills, that'd be great. And if somebody knows
press release.
Yeah, and if somebody knows what happens if the person who resigns is not affiliated with a party.
Oh, I know what happens.
In the future.
What happens is when you say, I want to be a candidate and you're unaffiliated, you put on your filing application, your filing document, who you want to be, who you want the vacancy committee to be.
When you originally run.
When you originally run.
Declare,
yes.
That's
for
almost
instance,
requiring someone to align with the party.
So for instance, Lynn Geisinger ran for RTD, which is a nonpartisan seat, and she did not put in a vacancy committee. She could have put in her sister, her sister could have been the entire vacancy committee, right? But she could have put in, 20 people. She could have put in whatever she wanted, but she didn't put anything in. So if she had become the House District 10 nominee for state rep, Democratic nominee for state rep, then I don't know, I think the governor or maybe the RTD board would have picked her replacement, but you should fill in that vacancy committee line on your form if you're running unaffiliated.
Got it, but it doesn't have to be a party. Okay, cool.
No, it doesn't have to be a party. So, thanks, Mark, for helping out.
Glad to help. It looks like the testimony, if it's needed, will come up pretty quickly if they're going to adjourn on May 8th.
It will come up before May 7th. I think they're adjourning, right? May 7th, May 8th. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll look at it. Stuff in North Carolina is pretty interesting. And I don't know when the law review editors are going to send my article back and say, you have to respond to these 500 points in the next 2 weeks, which might sort of distract me. But anyway, I'm interested. We'll be in touch. I got to go.
Okay,
Thanks so much.
I think that's
Well,
what we
is
had on the
the
meeting.
press release somewhere we can post?
It should be on the, I mean, I have a copy of it. I
looking.
can email it to you, but that's not a very good solution. I
I'm
have a
looking
link
for it.
to the Google Doc, but I don't think that's where they want people going. So,
It's not under league news.
Say, is it on the league website anywhere, or is it?
That's what I'm
under-
looking at. I don't find it.
Is it under take action? Do they have things posted under there for any reason?
let me show it to you.
Well, really, yeah. I mean, some link so that we're not going to
Yeah.
read it right now.
I mean, I can send it to all of you, but
Why don't you do that? That works.
okay. Here it is. I sent it to Mark already, so he's seen it. We have our 3 amendments here that we propose. You know, we mentioned the Colorado Constitution. Oh, I think we're missing Article 5. Should be Article 5, Section 2. Oops.
Whoops.
I even read it once before they sent it out, and I see that we made a mistake. So that's what I know. I think we should go, we should officially adjourn this meeting and stop the recording.
I'll also just say that there's a page that the league has with press releases, but they're all like years old. So
I will
someone
ask Katina.
text.
I will ask Katina and I'll tell her about the Article 5 thing that I missed earlier. Okay, I'm stopping my
Great
sharing.
meeting. Thank y'all.
Okay, and I will send everybody here. I'm writing your names down. So I get you. Will you stop the recording? Who's I think Jen maybe, or Pat, who's the host?
We got a message somewhere along the way. that said
Celeste,
that
you
you're
are
the
the host.
Yeah,
Good to know.
I'm not, because I'm trying to stop the recording and it's not
If you
working.
go to participants, it says Celeste